All right, hello. Welcome back. And I know it's been a little bit of a break here we've had, but we have lots of new things to share. So I wanted to make sure I was 100% on some of them. But we are back and we're going to get right back into it. We're going to go kind of a different direction for this kind of section we're going to go through here. But I'm pretty confident that it'll be interesting and I hope you enjoy it. So, actually, where we're going to start is by this distinction. And this is going to be a good way to kind of review what we've already talked about. And this is a good way to show how it's sort of these same themes are nested in everything. The distinction we're going to make is between knowledge and wisdom. And what I typically do at this point is I'll ask people to define what knowledge is and what a job would be that people would need a lot of knowledge for. And invariably, typically people would talk about doctors or lawyers or perhaps engineers or something like that. Something that you need a large amount of time in university or some sort of training realm in order to gain enough information to be able to do it. And then I'll ask them, what is a job where you use a lot of wisdom or have a lot of wisdom? And what typically happens if it works well with the class is that they'll talk about the same sort of jobs, but later on. So, for example, they'll talk about lawyers, and lawyers that are wise will eventually become judges, and doctors that are very good will be heads of medicine. And so the question is what do some people gain in that process of learning the skills and converting them into wisdom that some people miss? And there's some good examples of this, but let's first go through like the actual definition so we kind of get a better idea. So these are just off of Google. But knowledge, facts, information, skills acquired by a person through experience or education. And I think it's more this education experience, yes, but it's more like the base set of skills, not really anything beyond that. It's usually done by people that are considered very intelligent to be done really quickly. And yeah, I would I want to address this intelligence issue later on, but right now is not the best time. I don't really think intelligence is what we think it is, so we'll address that at some other point. Wisdom is the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. So it's sort of a serration, right? So these things come first, and then you gain this good judgment. Is kind of what I'm reading between the lines of this. Uh, and what is good? So this is a question, sort of like what our other person there, what was his name? Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Robert Persig. His question was, what was quality? And it's kind of the same thing. And what I'm going to say is what those people are learning during this process is universal truth. So something that is true no matter what the context given. And we'll give some examples in history that show these pitfalls that came across every culture and how people were encouraged to trespass or bypass them, rather. So our two sides, which we called sort of classical on this side, right? So this would be our square side, and this would be our circle side. So if we take the two opposite sides, those that are refiners or people that are very knowledgeable are people. A good example is Stumpf Schwab off of ESPN. So this guy it was kind of a game show, I guess you could say, and you try to remember or you try to outdo this guy named Schwab, who knew basically what seemed like just about everything in history of sports, and it was incredible. Like his ability to uh, recognize. That's just a word we'll break down at some point. Or remember and recall information was absolutely incredible. But what we learned, if you watch the show, is he's a little bit petulant. He would throw kind of little temper tantrums, and he'd be very reactive. He wasn't in control of himself, is what it seemed like. And this is kind of he's a really good example of what I'm trying to say. And on the other hand, people that, if we just think about it, people that are usually quite calm are grandparents, because they've seen all these things. And what I'd explain to kids if I was doing this same thing, I would say, well, think about what makes your grandparents wise. You have a problem in your life. They wouldn't know anything specifically about what's going on with the people involved, and maybe you broke up with somebody, or maybe you lost a friend or something like that. But they could always give you good advice because they've sifted through all this experience and all this knowledge that they had, and all these different different not really experiences, but different tests throughout their lives, and they found out what worked no matter what. And this universality is what we've been talking about lots in the past. And I think grandparents are a great example of that because they may not have much knowledge in any one field, but they've really been able to generalize. And that generalization is a key characteristic of this side, these intuition people. In history, we can see a lot of examples of this. So let's go in reverse order here. Let's start with a contemporary one. So Conor McGregor, we all kind of know him. I really like Conor, and I think Conor is going to become more than what he is today. Like as far as he's very emotional, as we were saying with the Schwab, right? He's reactive, and the Greeks used to call this hubris. So excessive pride in what they do, which makes them overly reactive because they're protecting their ego, kind of thing. So I would say that's kind of true for Conor. That maybe that's just my opinion, but like I say, I think he'll eventually see through it and he'll eventually make the next step. I like him, and I think there's nothing wrong with boldness. I think that's a great quality to have. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think he's just a very bold man, and but maybe gone over a little bit too far. In history, we can see examples of this all throughout. So in the Greeks, it would be Achilles. So if you read the Iliad, it's really about Achilles' lack of control of his emotions and rage. The "Sing to me, muse of Achilles' rage," or something like the first sentences of it is talking about how he couldn't be in control of himself. Although he was the greatest warrior there was, he was incredible. Everybody would say that, and he was almost immortal. That he could almost do anything, but he couldn't be in control of himself. And this is that wisdom, that calming reaction. An example, and most of the time I've taught a lot of people from China. So the example I'll give from Chinese and the story of the Three Kingdoms, I believe it was called, is Li Bu. Li Bu was the same sort of character as Achilles. Is the same warning that is in history of these really talented people, but are not in control of themselves and overly prideful. And this is called hubris. And this is something that we don't mind today, especially when these people are riding high. Connor's kind of like a super high, super low kind of guy. But the medium point, it doesn't really make sense if I do it like that, but the median point is always kind of the same. And I think I respect people that live this way. But he's got to find the way, the truth in between all these situations, I believe. In if we do this in reverse order, in ancient China, the people that would be the opposite of this, not the hubris people, or not the people that displayed hubris, would be the people that displayed arete. And a characteristic of arete is excellence in anything and everything. It doesn't really matter what, but it's something that can be generalized. So somebody like Guan Yu here was a great warrior, maybe not the greatest, but a great warrior, and also a good statesman, also a very intelligent man, also a very loyal person. He had many different aspects of himself that made him a balanced person. Same is true for Odysseus, and Odysseus was kind of like seen as more of the hero of the story of the fall of Troy. He was successful no matter what. He found a way to win. He found a way to make himself successful, even though he wasn't always the best at something. He wasn't the best at one thing. If we take an example from sports, like we did with Connor, the person that would be the best example of this sort of arete would be somebody like Ken Dryden. So Ken Dryden was an incredibly successful hockey player, but immediately afterwards became a lawyer, became a politician after that. He wasn't going to confine himself to being good at one thing. He wasn't going to rest on his sort of belief of him being great at one thing. You can see, we probably know examples of people like this in our own past, that people that can't let go of something they were good at and not move on. But these guys were the kind of ones that could generalize analogies from their sporting lives and apply them to the rest of the world. And I think Dryden's a good example of that. So this may be conjecture on my part, but Einstein would say this. So education is what remains after one has forgotten everything learned in school. So most of what you learn in school is going to be forgotten. Most of what you learn in school is particular to one thing. But what is left is what matters. So what matters is the sort of processes that your brain learns in there that makes it good at acquiring new information and applying new information. But if you look at it, it's that ability to generalize things, that ability to take something and show that it can work the same way in a completely different situation. And this is basically what Plato was talking about. If we want to have knowledge, we have to have something that never changes. And learning wisdom is more important than learning specifics, as what I would say kind of Aristotle was more about, was learning the specifics of the world. Plato was more interested in not learning the ephemeral, but learning the eternal, because of a lot of reasons. One of the most important was what we talked about with the Parmenides there, and Parmenides proving to his teacher Aristotle that a priori was real and that reality didn't change, and all of perceptive changes are not real, don't tell you of the true a priori. So if we apply this to our other story that we were talking about, Life of Pi, so we think of that moment when his dad taught him that lesson that showed him that the tiger killing the goat, I guess it was, and afterwards he said, life lost its beauty, patterns and numbers going on without meaning, like my irrational name, Pi. So after that moment happened, he just lost what he thought was the connectivity of the world. So he said he looked into the tiger's eye and he saw a soul, and then he lost that when he saw that moment. And if we apply this and move it forward, we look at the number pi and we see a number 6 in it. We can obviously, and people often always talk about this as about being about perspective. We can look at it from either side, and this person would say, oh, it's probably a 6. This person will probably say it's a 9. So what is truth for pi was, once he lost that connectivity, there was no truth. There was just only these isolated incidents that went on irrationally, like he said, his name did. And it's sort of like that river analogy that we gave before, that things are just chaotically changing. It doesn't mean anything. I don't remember if I read this somewhere, but this is the way I describe it, is that there's the true, so that will always be, it could be a 6, but there's also the good and the true. And the situation with the good and the true is that it's always true. And it brings something called eudaimonia. So that's what Plato called it. So, but good spirit. And we talked about that before. And we're going to talk about that again too. But the reason, how you know this would be a 6 is that it fits into this same pattern that is always consistent. So pi is always consistent. The 6 will always be there if it's pi. And that is always true. The truth will never change. So although it can be seen, if you look at it from this way, as a 9, it's not, that is the true. That isn't the good and the true. The good and the true is always consistent. So one of them fits together. And this is a theme that we'll be coming back to over and over again as we develop this new topic I'm going to be getting into soon, is that these sort of nested realities that are always true. So it looks like it could be chaotic. And if you want it to be chaotic, it will be chaotic. But if you look for the unity, the generalities, then you'll be able to see that there is these consistencies. The way that they explained it in the movie was pi ended up being lost for 227 days, which of course rationalizing pi is usually done 22/7. So this is showing that although it looked like it was chaos, it really wasn't. And then the name of the tiger in Edgar Allan Poe's story shows us that time doesn't matter in this situation. So Richard Parker. And then love coming into your life unbidden is all about this choice, about this impulse to go towards something and this impulse to go away from something. And what I want you to remember from The Matrix is when he was talking to the Oracle and he says, you've already made the choice. Now you need to understand it. And it's not even really about understanding the choice, but it's about recognizing that the choice is influencing what is there. But that's going to sound just chaotic and weird right now. So just kind of just put that in the side of your mind, and we'll address it later. But Carl Jung says, in all chaos there is cosmos, in all disorder a secret order. And this is exactly what Life of Pi taught us, right? So anyway, that's as much as we'll talk about today. We'll address another topic here really soon. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll talk to you soon.